Welcome to STO Teck Trek. I'm your host, Astro Zombie, and my co-host over here, Aponte. So hello, Aponte.
How we doing?
Today we have a very special guest, Darth Protius. He's going to be talking about psi magic.
Sup?
But anyways, what'd you guys think of that intro?
I thought it was awesome, and I want to thank Snipey personally because that was really cool of him to do.
Yeah, he just out of nowhere, he's just like, "Hey, dude, I'm gonna make you an intro," and bam, there you go. So, yeah, let us know in the comments below what you guys think about that. So, there hasn't been much going on in STO recently, except for the re-engineering system. Unfortunately, I could not get Trouble to patch, so I can't talk too much about it, but Aponte and Darth Proteus can. So, what's going on with the re-engineering system, guys?
So basically, there's a new system in which you could take certain items, because not everything yet, and put them into this re-engineering system where you could change certain mods on the beam. Let's say you have a damage 3 accuracy beam, and you really want to change it to damage 4 or damage 3 crit D. You now have the ability to actually try to re-roll that accuracy mod and get one that you would want that would better suit that beam. What does it cost again? Salvage and stuff, this new thing?
Yeah, salvage, and you get that from breaking down,
Alright, yeah.
It's actually a pretty robust system. I like it personally.
Yeah.
I think it's going to balance out nicely here in the future. It's definitely going to kill the beam market, but people have been selling crap in there for way too much, for way too long anyway, so I'm fine with that. But it's nice that people can actually put the mods on the weapons that they want. Mind you, you can't alter rep weapons. And what else?
Not yet.
Think certain fleet weapons can't be, certain consoles.
I've got a list.
Okay, we could link that below then. That'd be nice.
Yeah, as opposed to just sitting here going da 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 da.
Yeah.
Proudly brought to you by Morn's Pleasure Palace. Utilizing Spore Drive technology, delivering you instant relief from those lonely deep space voyages. Morn's Pleasure Palace, located in Beijing's spicy red light district in the Alpha Quadrant.
Anyway, so let's move on to Darth Protius. Dude, so what has changed since post-season 13 with Science?
Actually, not a whole hell of a lot. A lot of the old meta builds for DPS, the tactical builds, and some of the old weird science builds got nerfed a bit. I don't really want to say nerfed, but, you know, a lot of their DPS was cut down because of some of the, the way consoles were working together and, the way feedback pulse was working, and they just changed the way all that works. But my build, the pure exotic build, really didn't see that big of a hit. So as far as what's changed so much for Season 13, not a whole lot. I mean, we got a few cool new powers, some new trinkets with the rep system and stuff like that, but nothing really big has changed.
But, I mean, you've had to make some tweaks and changes since, correct?
Not for a long time, up until probably about 2-3 weeks ago. That's when I started making some changes, because I discovered a few other things that work very well with my build, and it's, I mean, not huge major changes, but big enough to show an improvement over the DPS we did lose.
Mm.
I mean, things like the new colony deflectors, those are actually going to be more important for this type of build than the old Solene deflector was, because you can actually do a lot more min-maxing with it, and there's a lot more control of what you're going to be able to use on that particular deflector, especially with the re-engineering system coming in, because those are re-engineerable.
Oh, so you could put like a bunch of part gen or Drain X on it instead.
Oh yeah, you can completely customize the new colony deflectors to whatever you want.
Alright, so one thing I actually want to point out about this is that you'll see a lot of people flying science tunes that pretty much have a basic kind of tactical build just copied over and pasted onto a science character. Now, the builds we're actually talking about here that Proteus really does with Psi Magic is really heavy in using the science exotic abilities for that damage. And there's only a handful of people who actually do science this way, especially at that level. So this is a build where the majority of your top damage dealers are going to be science exotic abilities, secondary deflectors, subspace vortex, things along that nature. You know what I mean? So this is not just a copied tactical build over, which is what makes seeing those numbers out of it really awesome.
Yeah, that's why when even before season 13, I ran with this build. I mean, I've been doing science since basically the game came out. I've been always running a science tune as my main, and I've seen the evolution of science come through over the years. And this has basically been the particulars of my build. Is I've always gone towards more of the exotic damages and the gravity wells, and when subspace vortex came out, and then the secondary deflectors hit the market. I've always gravitated towards the more exotic type build rather than sticking with a tactical base build and doing the whole fire at will thing and expecting all my damage to come from my beams and my weapons.
Yeah, which is, I mean, most of them, and this is pretty much how I got into science, literally, was actually watching his videos and kind of taking these different builds, playing with them for a while. Obviously, everybody has their own little tweaks and style, and I've had great success with it. So anybody who wants to get into this, check out his stuff. It really does help, and he breaks it down for you. But one of the things I was most impressed about when it first happened is, I mean, the weapons are almost secondary. I mean, you use some torps that work well with EPG, like the gravimetric and the particle emission. But other than that, most of those weapons are set bonuses stuff, like the chronometric set and things like that, or you're using them just for their procs, not the actual damage.
Yeah, it's and a lot of people ask that question is, why are you using this? Why are you using that? Why don't you just put actual beams on there and do more damage to the beams? And then, and I get that, but it's not what the build was meant to do. It was meant to literally show the power of exotic science magic. And the only real weapon that does a whole hell of a lot of damage on my build is the Terran Beam. But again, that's there for a little bit extra damage boost and for the weapon procs that come off of it for the science stuff.
Now, you're using 2 torpedoes as well in this build, correct?
On this particular boat, I am. Because, and for those of you who don't know, my main boat is the Sphere Builder E-Dog, because it's one of the better science boats in the game. I wouldn't say best, but pretty close for my taste. But I use 2 torpedoes on the front, and that torpedo changes out depending on what I'm running. Like if I'm doing a heavy CCA, I'll do a gravimetric torp and a pep torp up front. Or if I'm going to do an HSE, I'll take the grav torp off and put the quantum phase torp on there for the extra shield drain. It's just little things like that you change out on the build. But for the most part, the build is very versatile in just about any run you're going to do.
I actually have a question that's been asked to me a few different times for people who may want to get into this. And they see the build, they look at your video, they see the different consoles and what they do. Now, there's the difference, obviously, between a console that's going to give you a set number, like the Field Exciter is going to give you plus 75 to Starship exotic particle gens, and then something like the Delphic Tear, which is going to give you plus 20% bonus exotic damage. Now, is there a set number that you look to get to before the consoles that are giving you the bonus percentage? Like, is there a number that you think you need to get to and then you could start boosting the bonus?
As far as EPG goes, I found that right around between 400 and 480 is the target number you want to be at for this level of damage. That's right around where the EPG literally becomes almost unstackable at that point, because you've got so much EPG already and you're getting all the bonuses from your part gen traits and stuff like that. So right around 400 to 480 is what you want to shoot for. And then from there, you want to stack as much bonus exotic damage on your consoles as you possibly can, because that is a Cat 2 bonus. Anything with the word bonus in it is a Cat 2 damage modifier that literally just shoots your stuff straight to the moon.
Just on a side note, what exactly is a Cat 2? What is it multiplied by?
All right, let's take, for instance, your damage modifiers on your weapons, okay? Those are considered a Cat 1 bonus. And Cat 1 bonuses are applied to your base damage of your weapon, which is basically to say, let's say you had 1,000 base damage on your weapon, and you had a 10% Cat 1 bonus damage. So now you've got literally 1100 base damage. And the Cat 2 damage gets applied after Cat 1. So anything that's a Cat 1 damage modifier stacks up first. And then all of your Cat 2 multipliers get multiplied on top of that number. So Cat 2 is very important for exotic damage because we don't have a lot of Cat 1 damage boosts, but we do have a great deal of Cat 2.
Another thing you need to be aware of there, let's say you're running a ship with 4 tactical console slots, and you put in the vulnerability locators from the Fleet Spire. If your base damage, like you said, is 1,000, and it says 25%, it's going to add 25% to that. If you then add another, it's not giving you diminishing returns as some people say it. What it's doing is it's not giving you 25% of 1,250. It's giving you another 250 because it's still based off of that base damage. So that's just something for people to keep in mind there.
Yeah, because a lot of people get that confused. They think that if they stack all this, it's going to multiply all at once. But no, it's multiplied separately against the base damage.
And now another thing you've been testing, actually, because the secondary deflectors that you use and I use, the crafted one, they could be a little difficult to get to the perfect one. And obviously, if you want to buy it, it can definitely be expensive. But I've heard you talking recently about the secondary deflector from the colony.
Oh yeah, for those who don't know, a lot of people are running deteriorating secondary deflectors, and those are very expensive to get the perfect ones. I've seen them go up as high as 200 million for a good one. But with the recent addition of the Colony World holding, they gave us more secondary deflector choices, and a lot of these are actually really good and a really viable choice for people who are on a budget. So if you can't afford the big secondary deflectors, the cheap alternative, which will work very effectively, is to go with the Colony ones, which are actually testing out pretty well versus the crafted one.
And now another note about why you go for deteriorating over inhibiting. Obviously, each one, I believe, is procced off by different abilities, correct?
The deteriorating and secondary are both basically the same as far as the proc chances go.
No, I mean different abilities, I thought. Because I know there's one where gravity is one of, but like with the deteriorating secondary reflector, it's things like, charge particle burst, energy siphon, tachyon beam, those are what trigger it. But I thought there's another one that's based off of things like Tychon's Rift and Gravity Well.
I'm trying to look here to see. I don't think it lists that anymore on the actual deflector.
Yeah, which is quite kind of interesting. You'd think it would want to tell you.
Yeah, because it used to be there was certain things that worked with the secondary deflectors and certain things that didn't.
Yeah.
Versus which one you were using. Like in the inhibiting, the Gravity Well always worked with that, but the proc chance on it was at the end of the cycle of the Gravity Well, which is why everybody's using deteriorating now, because it's a dot over time. So you're getting more use out of that on a faster run than you would on inhibiting.
Yes, because the deteriorating deals the radiation damage every second for 10 seconds, whereas the inhibiting waits 4 seconds and then will deal it. And if you've been on runs with certain people with higher DPS, you'll notice that sometimes things aren't going to be alive long enough to really get the effects of the inhibiting. So yeah.
Yeah, and we're looking at, from the testing that I've done when they first came out, the inhibiting might have gotten you maybe, 10, 11k worth of damage back then.
Yep.
Whereas the deteriorating was getting 20, 30k worth of damage, adversely. Basically a huge difference between the two because of the speed of the run.
And another thing about these science builds, actually, is that I noticed when I was, maybe showing people more budget builds and stuff when they were requesting that kind of stuff, a lot of times, if a ship had the capability of doing it, I would go pretty science heavy because, a lot of these consoles that, like, obviously, if you have a science ship, it might come with a console that boosts DPG, something like that, and that's nice, like the E-Dog and the Eternal, they all have them. But the other ones you're looking at, like the Delphic Tear, the Constriction Anchor, these are consoles that you get on the exchange for a pretty decently cheap price. So I also don't think that these science builds are that expensive and that much grinding, to be honest, So it's definitely something that's not going to take people a long time to get into and can definitely help somebody put out some good damage pretty fast.
Well, yeah, most of the build, as far as gear is concerned, is basically rep stuff. A few things from the Spire, the research lab. I mean, so stuff you can readily get your hands on, and stuff like the Constriction Anchor and the Delphic Tear. I mean, those things can, depending on your budget, can be a little costly, but they've come down in price a great deal over the years, so they're still accessible. The only huge cost to my build, particularly, is some of the traits that I'm using, because they come off of lockbox ships. Like, for instance, the Charged Particle Burst comes off of, actually, a C-Store ship comes off of the T6 Vesta. And that one is a really important one for this kind of build because of the amount of damage it just puts out with the Charged Particle Burst. But you do not need to have it if you can't get a hold of it. It's not something that's going to break the build. I mean, on average, most science builds, if you put it together correctly, you're going to see anywhere from 50 to 75k out of that with that, on a pure budget. But if you go ahead and add some of the stuff that we've got here, some of the the C-Store starship traits and things like that, you're going to boost up your damage that much more.
So I've heard you say this a bunch of times. Somebody will be like, we'll watch a video or hear somebody break a record and be like, oh, I did this on a side build. And then you look it up and then you're like, that's not a side build. What's the difference between a side build and not?
Well, a side build is basically any build that uses or invests heavily into science magic. So you've got Gravity Well, you got Subspace Vortex, you've got destabilizing resonance beams, you've got your secondary deflector, and your build is focused primarily on all of the exotic damage, the radiation, stuff like that. Now, a lot of these guys that are breaking records, per se, with their science characters, they're using a full-on beam fire at will build or a heavy torpedo build and throwing one or two science abilities in there and saying it's a science build when it's not. Basically, it's a tactical build with a little extra science magic added to it. That's all it is.
Yeah, I mean, I actually looked up, before doing this, just to see some of the science records where science captains were at, and then kind of looked at a lot of their parses. And, I mean, honestly, the only people I see up there in the range is Ernest, who is another guy who I think runs different variations, but does use, exotic and really does some cool things with that, like you. And then you. I mean, those are the two real high over 125 up there that are actually going exotic as their main damage.
Yeah, I think Ernest, myself, and there's like maybe one or two other people that are doing pure exotic builds, and most of the other people are using a science captain and then going in a science boat with a FAW build, and that's really not the same thing.
Yeah.
But they have a Gravwell 1 on there.
My torpedo boat has a Gravwell 1 on it. That doesn't make it a science build.
And now for anybody who might have thought, always heard, oh, science is really good for CCA, like a heavy exotic build, but for the other maps. I mean, right now, in ISA, I don't think an exotic boat is necessarily going to go up to quite where beam boats could. But if you want to look at HSE right now, science boats, as well, just like torpedo, there's that's right there in the top 10, and with very few runs actually under the belt. So science is absolutely something that could be taken into any map and do really well and help out. It was a big part of why our team that put together those Corfez runs recently, it was a big part of why our runs went well after a couple of tries. So
yeah, it's science is very versatile and handy in a lot of different situations because you literally have the ability to control the rate of the way the map is going. So you with your gravity wells and all of your holds and your stuns, your placates and stuff like that, you literally are the control master for that map. So you're controlling the flow so that the other guys on the team can actually do damage and focus on where they need to focus instead of having to run around like chickens with their heads cut off.
And actually another place where, just because some of the people who might be listening and want to get into Psi might not know too much about it, but so your auxiliary power similar to how it affects your healing, also boost your exotic damage, correct?
Correct. That's why on my boats I will run full aux power all the way to the max, and then the rest of it I'm going to put into the weapon damage just for that extra shield stripping and a little bit extra damage against the hull, so this way that it can speed up the run.
Yeah. So almost actually the way I opposite most of my builds. I mean, obviously, if you're going to run aux to bat on a beamboat or something, it might be different. But if I'm running a straight up beamboat, it's weapons to the max and then auxiliary as high I can get it. Where this is, just a juxtaposition of that. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's like the polar opposite of it.
Yeah.
And one thing I've had people ask me is, how am I getting these numbers? And I'm going to tell people straight up, plain and simple. It's nothing magical. There's no secret to it. There's no hidden sauce or secret ingredient. The only thing that really makes the numbers the way they are is your mastery of the build. If you are very proficient with the way your build works, everything, how everything interacts with everything, when to place gravity wells out, when to hit your DRB, when to, hit your charge particle burst, and where you're positioning yourself on the map. Those are very key things to making the build do big numbers. I mean, if you're not very proficient, you're going to walk in there, you probably do 30, 40, 50K with the same identical build, until you become a master of flying that particular boat.
Yeah, I'll vouch for that, because I consider myself a pretty good pilot with a lot of the builds that I was using earlier, and beam boats, torp boats, and I mean, before we even really played together or anything like that, I mean, I literally started doing Psy by just watching your builds and then doing it, and, at first I think I was seeing 70, 75, and it was only after time that I was able to get it up to 100, then 110, 120 in that area where I am right now. So, this build, these numbers are definitely obtainable, but you can't expect to do it overnight, but there is nothing hidden in there. I mean, this is just him. He's done it forever, and, practice makes perfect, honestly.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't do one or two runs like every other week and expect to, to be on the top of the board. I mean, like, how many runs did we do today? What, 20, 30?
Yeah, easily.
Yeah. I mean, I've been back for a couple weeks, and I still don't think I've shaken off the rust yet, so.
Yeah, I'm still rusty. But it's like that old joke goes, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice.
Yeah. And I mean, it's that way for all of these different styles of builds, but yeah,
Yeah, I've even had people who were proficient with beam builds and torpedo builds try out the build for one or two runs and like, I can't do this. I don't know how you're doing it. Well, you need to practice with it. You need to literally sit down and focus on when you're doing things and how you're doing things, and then become comfortable with it, and then you'll get better.
All right, I mean, so yeah, remember, guys, if this is something that you're interested in, definitely go check out Protius's YouTube channel. Check out the videos. He does a great job of going into detail on them. We'll put the link in below, like always. So a couple of other things that are going on in STO. The Sumpak event, the arena, is probably coming into an end today when you listen to this. But the other thing is the featured series will be going on until January 25th, which is your chance to do some of the older missions again and get some of the past rewards, like the Ophidian Cane, a couple of the duty officers, the Shard of Possibilities. So if that's something you missed out on, be sure to check it out. It lists what episode you have to do to get those rewards. So
get them while they're hot.
All right, guys. So thanks. And again, a shout out to Snipey. That intro was awesome. He did a great job at that. So leave some love below for him. And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks.